Welcome to the deep dive. We often take things for granted, but have you ever stopped to ask, say, why didn't the Chinese, with those massive fleets, discover Europe?
Or, why did it take so long for us to accept that the Earth orbits the sun? Seems obvious now, doesn't it?
It really does. And here's one I found fascinating. The idea of distinct species plants,
Mhm.
animals, that's actually a relatively recent concept.
Exactly. These are the kinds of unfamiliar questions we're digging into today, using Daniel Boorstin's incredible book, The Discoverers, as our guide.
It's all about how breakthroughs actually happen, the messy reality, not just the heroic story.
Right. The accidents, the tools people didn't even know they needed, the cultural roadblocks. It's quite a ride.
So our mission here is to pull out those surprising details, those insights from Boorstin that really shift your perspective on how knowledge gets made.
Yeah, you'll see how random inventions can be, how stubborn biases are, and how just slowly piling up facts, even controversially, reshaped everything.
Think of it as your shortcut to sounding incredibly well-informed, maybe even dropping some unexpected historical tidbits at your next dinner party. Hashtag tag I. The fabric of time and the mapping of the unknown. Okay, let's kick things off with something fundamental. Time. How we measure it. You'd think knowing the seasons, the solar year, would be priority number one, right? For farming.
You would think. But Boorstin makes this great point about the moon. It's so easy to see its phases, a nice regular cycle.
Yeah, month by month.
Exactly. But turns out that was a bit of a trap. It didn't really help predict the seasons reliably at all.
Ah, okay. So convenience sort of trumped agricultural necessity initially?
In many ways, yes. You see the contrast, like in the Muslim world, strictly following the lunar calendar based on the Quran for Ramadan and pilgrimage.
Which means their festivals drift through the seasons, right?
Precisely. Compared to someone like Caesar, who just said, look, the sun works for seasons, let's make the solar year the standard. Much more practical for administration and agriculture.
Makes sense. But then the 24-hour day, where did that come from? It feels so natural.
It feels natural now, but its origins are actually pretty strange. It goes back to the Babylonians and their sexagesimal system.
Based on 60?
Yeah, multiples of 60. It was a mathematical convention, a way to divide things up. It wasn't really derived from watching the stars or the sun in a direct way.
So our basic unit of time comes from ancient math, not astronomy. That's unexpected.
It really is.
Yeah.
It pushes the mystery back, doesn't it? A choice made centuries ago for mathematical reasons.
Okay, so how do we get from that to clocks, mechanical clocks? I gather they didn't start out as timekeepers for everyone.
Not at all. The first big mechanical clocks in Europe were driven by monastic needs.
Monks needing to know when to pray.
Exactly. Striking bells for the canonical hours, compline at night, matins before dawn, and the design of these machines needing to cover the whole cycle.
Day and
Right. It sort of inadvertently standardized the idea of a 24-hour day with equal hours. It gave time this new kind of punchy staccato feel, very different from a sundial.
And some of these early clocks were like public spectacles, weren't they? More than just telling time.
Oh, definitely. They were huge civic statements. Think about the Wells Cathedral clock from around 1392. It wasn't just hours.
What else did it show?
Moon phases, the sun's position with a figure of Phoebus, even these little mechanical knights that jousted every hour.
Seriously, jousting knights.
Yeah, one gets knocked off his horse and gets back on. And this figure, Jack Blandefet, who'd strike the bell with a hammer and kick it with his heels for the quarter hours. Real entertainment.
That's amazing. A public drama run by clockwork. And the clock dial, seeing the time visually, when did that happen?
That's credited to Jacopo da Dondi around 1344. He got the nickname Del Orologio of the clock.
And his son took it even further.
His son, Giovanni, built something truly incredible called the Astrarium in 1364. A massive 5-foot-high brass machine.
What did it do?
Predicted eclipses, showed complex planetary movements on multiple dials. It was centuries ahead of its time. People came from all over just to marvel at it in Padua.
Incredible engineering. But huge, right? How did they get smaller? Portable? That seems key for clocks becoming widespread.
Yeah, portability was crucial. And for that, you needed something blacksmiths couldn't easily make. Screws.
Ah, precision manufacturing.
Exactly. Screws enabled smaller mechanisms, which then opened the door for other portable machines too, and smaller clocks meant a bigger market.
More demand driving innovation and maybe lower prices.
Precisely. By the 17th century, clockmaking was incredibly specialized. Ferdinand Berthon listed something like 16 different types of workers involved in making a single clock by 1763.
Wow. I always think of England as being big in clocks, but were they leaders from the start?
Actually, no. Early on, England relied heavily on imported French clockmakers, even for monarchs like Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth.
Really? So they were playing catch-up.
They were. But then, England became a refuge for skilled artisans fleeing persecution on the continent, Huguenots and others.
Ah, so immigration brought the skills in.
It filled a gap. And eventually, this led to English clockmakers organizing, getting a royal guild charter in 1631, and really taking off. It's a fascinating shift from dependency to dominance.
Okay, let's pivot. China. Their approach to timekeeping sounds completely different.
Very different priorities, it seems.
Yeah.
Chinese imperial clockworks, Boorstin says, were less focused on pinpoint accuracy and more on creating these incredibly elaborate, charming, mechanical toys.
Like entertainment for the court.
Exactly. But technically, they apparently got stuck with weight-driven clocks because they couldn't master making high-quality springs, which were key for portable, accurate European clocks.
Interesting technological bottleneck, and the calendar itself was a state secret. That sounds counterproductive to science.
Hugely restrictive. In China, the calendar was deeply tied to imperial authority. Each new dynasty issued its own calendar, not always based on better astronomy, but as a symbol of their mandate of heaven.
So you couldn't just make your own calendar?
Absolutely not. Private calendar making was seen as a threat to the emperor, potentially punishable. It created what Boorstin calls a Chinese wall of the mind, resisting outside astronomical knowledge, because control of time was control of power.
Wow. Okay, so wrestling with time was one huge challenge. What about space? Navigating the oceans? Why was longitude, figuring out your east-west position, so incredibly hard compared to latitude?
That was the killer problem for centuries. Latitude, north-south, is relatively easy. You measure the angle of the sun or known stars above the horizon.
Okay, seems doable.
But longitude. To know how far east or west you are, you need to know the time difference between your location and a known reference point, like Greenwich later on.
And that means you need a clock.
An incredibly accurate clock that works reliably on a moving ship through temperature changes, humidity.
Which they just didn't have for ages.
Exactly. That's why the Atlantic was such a barrier, why the New World remained hidden for so long. The longitude problem was fundamental.
Yet, even before solving that, Ptolemy had this huge influence on how people saw the world, right? Back in Roman Egypt.
Immense influence. Ptolemy, around the 2nd century AD, really shaped the map of the known world and the cosmos for over 1,000 years. His geography was groundbreaking.
How so?
He emphasized precise observation, used latitude and longitude systematically, even if his data wasn't perfect. He tried to fit theories to facts. His maps of the Roman Empire were remarkable for their time. But his overall picture of the universe, Earth-centered.
That became dogma.
A very powerful dogma, yes. Hard to overcome.
And medieval Christian maps took a different turn entirely, didn't they? Less about accuracy, more about faith.
Completely. They often literally put Jerusalem at the dead center, the navel of the world, based on scripture, like Ezekiel. Practical geography took a backseat.
So no helpful grid lines.
Not really. Maps like Cosmos's showed the Earth as a rectangular box with a lid, designed to fit Bible stories. They even argued against the Antipodes people on the other side of the world. Because how could they descend from Adam? It was a worldview actively resisting contradictory evidence.
So given all these challenges, the longitude problem, the mental map's what finally gave sailors the confidence to push out into the truly unknown oceans.
The magnetic compass. That was the game changer for space. Just like the clock eventually was for time.
How did it help so much?
It gave sailors a constant reference point, north, regardless of weather, sun, or stars.
Yeah.
It was simple, cheap, anyone could use it, literate or not.
So it freed them from having to see the sky.
Exactly. Especially in the cloudy North Atlantic. It provided this worldwide absolute for space, giving mariners the courage to venture further and, crucially, the confidence they could find their way back. It democratized exploration. #TAG2. The human imperative in accidental adventures and discovery.
Okay, so we have the tools, like the compass. Let's talk about the drive to explore. The Portuguese voyages around Africa sound like a whole new model of discovery.
They really were. Boorstin calls it a prototype of modern exploration. It wasn't just one hero's epic journey. It was a planned, long-term, collaborative, national adventure.
A team effort.
Yeah, the poet Camões even celebrated heroic peoples, plural, It was systematic, step by step, pushing down the African coast, building knowledge voyage by voyage. Very different from Columbus's single, bold gamble.
And Prince Henry the Navigator was key to making it systematic, setting up that center at Sagres.
Absolutely. Sagres became this clearinghouse for geographic information. Henry collected maps, reports from sailors, travelers, scholars. He even got a copy of Marco Polo.
And he made them keep records.
Yes, he encouraged, then required, accurate logbooks and charts. This turned map-making from a scattered craft into a cumulative science.
Yeah.
Each trip added to the map, corrected it. That was revolutionary.
So what were some key milestones as they pushed south?
Well, by 1445, Dinas Diaz got around Cape Verde, the westernmost point of Africa. Then you have Alvise de Cadamosto, a Venetian working for Henry, who accidentally bumps into the Cape Verde Islands in 1457.
Accidental discovery. Happens a lot, it seems.
Constantly. Cadamosto's accounts of what he saw, plants, people, customs, were really vivid and lured others further. Later, guys like Diogo Cão started planting stone pillars, padros, to mark Portuguese claims.
And wasn't there this underlying quest for Prester John, this mythical Christian king? Did that actually drive exploration?
It was a huge motivator, yes. This legend of a powerful Christian king, first thought to be in Asia, then later maybe Ethiopia. Europeans desperately wanted an ally against the Muslim world.
So finding him was a strategic goal.
Definitely. Prince Henry hoped to link up with him. King John II even sent expeditions both overland and by sea in 1387, specifically trying to reach Prester John. It shows how powerful myths and strategic hopes could fuel very real, very dangerous voyages.
Okay, let's shift to Columbus, probably the most famous discoverer. But his story is way more complex than the simple version, isn't it? His motivations were mixed.
Very mixed. He saw it as a high Christian mission, converting the idolaters of India. Interestingly, his voyage was ordered right after Spain expelled its Jewish population. He notes that connection in his journal.
So a religious and political context.
Absolutely. And he was looking for a westward route, one by which no one to this day knows for sure that anyone is gone. Big ambition.
And he relied on some, let's say, convenient geographical ideas and maybe fudged his numbers a bit.
He definitely leaned on sources like Pierre Daly's Imago Mundi, which handily made Asia seem much larger and the ocean much narrower than Ptolemy did. It fit his plan.
Confirmation bias,
This
basically.
time. And the logs. He kept two sets, one with the real distance traveled and a phony one showing less distance to keep the crew from panicking about how far they'd gone.
Did that work?
Apparently so. But the hilarious irony Boorstin points out is that his phony log often ended up being more accurate than his true one. Maybe wishful thinking skewed his own calculations.
That's incredible. But the biggest barrier for him wasn't the ocean, was it? It was his own mental map, the Ptolemaic view.
That was the huge conceptual block.
Yeah.
The accepted view was one big landmass, Europe, Asia, Africa, surrounded by a limited amount of water. There simply wasn't room in that model for a whole new continent like America.
So he couldn't accept what he'd found.
He just couldn't see it. Even on his last voyage, he was still convinced Cuba was part of mainland China, searching for a strait to get to Marco Polo's lands. He saw what his theory predicted, not the reality in front of him.
And the fallout was immediate, right? Spain and Portugal carving up the world.
Yep. The Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494. The Pope drew a line down the Atlantic west for Spain, east for Portugal.
Settled things neatly.
Not really. It gave Portugal the sea route to India and Brazil, but the line itself was vague and disputed for centuries. It basically set the stage for colonial competition.
Now, contrasting with Europe, let's look at China's Zheng Qi expeditions. Massive scale, but different goals.
Totally different. Huge fleets, led by eunuchs. And the motivations weren't primarily gold, spices, or conquest in the European sense. Later voyages, Boorstin notes, were partly driven by bringing back exotic animals for the emperor.
Like the giraffe.
Exactly. They thought the giraffe was a mythical qilin, a kind of unicorn, whose appearance signified heaven's blessing on the emperor. It was about reinforcing imperial legitimacy through wondrous tribute, not trade dominance.
Fascinating. But then these incredible voyages just stopped abruptly. What does that tell us?
That's the puzzle, isn't it? Such capability, then. Nothing.
Yeah.
Zheng, he had no successors. China turned inward. It suggests, as Boorstin argues, that the exploring impulse, that relentless outward push, just wasn't embedded in Chinese culture in the same sustained way it became in Europe.
A different historical path. What about the Vikings? They reached North America centuries before Columbus, but it didn't stick. Why not?
Boorstin's key idea here is feedback. The Vikings were amazing sailors and, frankly, very effective hit-and-run raiders. Their Nors were perfect for swift attacks, especially on monasteries.
And they hopped across the North Atlantic.
Yeah, island by island. Faroes, Iceland, often found by accident, blown off course, then Greenland. Leif Erikson definitely made it to Vinland in North America.
So they were there.
But it didn't lead to a continuous flow of information, goods, or people back to Scandinavia that fundamentally changed their society or spurred further larger-scale efforts. Leif's brother, Thorvald, tried to follow up but got killed by natives, and they eventually pulled back.
So no feedback loop.
Exactly. Unlike the post-Columbus era, where stuff, gold, silver, potatoes, tobacco, syphilis, and knowledge constantly flowed back to Europe, transforming it and fueling more exploration. The Viking discovery, like finding Roman coins in Venezuela, was a dead end because it didn't create that sustained interaction and change back home. Finding isn't enough. Integrating the finding is key.
That feedback idea is powerful. It's not just finding, it's connecting. Let's apply that inward. Discovering the human body. What stopped people from understanding basic anatomy for so long?
Well, several things. Just plain common sense, folk beliefs, but also the medical establishment itself. Knowledge was locked up in Latin, Greek, Arabic, the domain of elite doctors of physics.
Not for everyday people, or even surgeons, really.
Not in the same way. And it was all based on ancient authorities, especially Galen. His theories about the four humors, disease being an internal imbalance, that was the unquestioned truth.
So strong that doctors didn't believe their own eyes.
That's incredible, but yes.
Yeah.
Boorstin mentions Jacobus Sylvius, a leading anatomist. When his dissections didn't match Galen's descriptions, he concluded that the human body itself must have degenerated over time.
Wow. Rather than question Galen.
Galen had to be right. That's the power of dogma.
Then along comes Paracelsus. Sounds like a real disruptor.
A mad prophet, Boorstin calls him. He just ridiculed the whole humoral theory. He insisted diseases had specific external causes, maybe minerals, maybe poisons from stars.
Okay, still a bit out there at the stars, maybe.
Sure, his own framework was complex, involving alchemy and astrology. But the key shift was looking outside the body for specific causes of specific diseases. That pointed towards modern medicine, even if his details were off.
What about Leonardo da Vinci? His anatomical drawings are stunning. Did they advance knowledge?
They're masterpieces, absolutely. But the tragedy, Boorstin notes, is that they remained largely private. His notebooks were scattered after his death.
So nobody saw them.
Not widely, not in a way that influenced other anatomists or medical teaching at the time. So, despite his genius, his anatomical work added little or nothing to the shared knowledge. Discovery needs dissemination.
Unlike Andreas Vesalius, he made a splash.
A huge splash. Vesalius was focused. His book, De Humani Corporis Fabrica, on the fabric of the human body, published in 1543, same year as Copernicus, was revolutionary.
Why? Better drawings.
Amazing illustrations, yes. He understood their importance and worked closely with a great printer, Operinus. But also, he based it directly on his own dissections, openly challenging Galen where they differed.
And he had to get creative finding bodies, right? Dissection was frowned upon.
Highly controversial. He talks about body snatching, dealing with executioners. He meticulously documented what he actually saw, like the effects of a tight corset on a girl's organs, or the state of the hymen. He insisted on repeated dissection to know what was normal versus an anomaly. He built the foundation.
And Vesalius paved the way for William Harvey and the circulation of blood, another takedown of Galen.
Exactly. Harvey, building on work by his teacher Fabricius, who showed valves in veins, figured out the blood circulates. Galen thought the liver made blood, and it just sort of washed through the body and was consumed.
A completely different picture.
Totally. Harvey used quantitative arguments, experiments. He compared the heart to the sun of our microcosm, the central engine. And he insisted, like Vesalius, learn from dissections of the fabric of nature, not just ancient books. Empirical evidence first.
Okay, from the body to the unseen world. The microscope, like the telescope, kind of an accidental invention.
It seems so. Lenses, eyeglasses were probably stumbled upon by craftsmen, lay people. Learned scholars ignored them for ages.
Why?
Partly theoretical biases about vision, ideas about rays coming from the eye, and partly a focus on perfect geometric forms, not flawed glass. But the microscope, once developed,
It opened up whole new continents.
dark continents, Boorstin calls them. And unlike astronomy or voyages needing huge resources, the microscope was democratic. Any curious individual could explore these hidden worlds.
Enter Leeuwenhoek, the draper from Delft with his tiny lenses.
Antony van Leeuwenhoek. He ground his own superb lenses and saw things no one had imagined. His letters to the Royal Society described animalcules in rainwater, pond scum, even in his own saliva.
Little animals.
Tiny living creatures. He estimated thousands, millions in a single drop of wire. He calculated numbers like 2,730,000 living creatures. It was a conceptual bombshell life existed on this whole other scale. He kept some methods secret, hinting at even tinier things.
Back to China quickly. They had optics, glass, mirrors early on. Why didn't they develop the microscope or telescope in the same way?
It's another paradox. They had sophisticated optical theories, Mohist optics, way back. They weren't stuck on the soul in the eye idea. They understood light rays. They had eyeglasses by the 15th century.
So technologically capable, but
But their astronomy, as Father Ricci noted, was focused differently, more on astrology tied to imperial power, recording phenomena precisely, but not necessarily building theoretical models like the Greeks' crystalline spheres. The questions they were asking were different.
and when the Jesuits brought news of the telescope?
Initially, huge enthusiasm. Father John Schreck, who knew Galileo, was excited. But then came news of Galileo's condemnation by the Church in 1633.
That put a damper on things.
It seems so. While they still used telescopes, the Jesuits in China stopped pushing the Copernican heliocentric model, external politics influencing scientific exchange again.
So many factors. Okay, classifying life. John Ray and the idea of species. That sounds fundamental.
It really was. Before Ray, classification was often top-down, based on big categories. Ray started bottom-up, observing individual plants and animals. He developed the concept of species as the basic unit, groups of organisms that could reproduce with each other. It gave naturalists a handle on a system.
A way to organize the sheer variety.
Exactly. He recognized continuity, intermediates, but the species concept provided crucial clarity.
And then Linnaeus took classification and ran with it using plant sex.
Carl Linnaeus. His system was based on the reproductive parts of plants, stamens, and pistils. And he used quite suggestive terminology.
Like what?
Classes like monandria, one husband in a marriage, polyandria, 20 males or more in the same bed. He called the calyx the nuptial bed. A bit racy, maybe, but incredibly practical.
Practical how?
It was relatively easy to apply. It fueled a global explosion of specimen collecting. Linnaeus sent his students, his apostles, all over the world. He knew his system was artificial, based on just one feature, but it worked to impose order.
But he believed species were fixed, right? Created as they are now.
Yes, as many species now as were created in the beginning. That constancy was actually helpful for his classification system. Change would mess it up.
Which must have clashed with the emerging idea of deep time. How did Buffon challenge the biblical timelines so drastically?
Georges-Louis Leclerc, Comte Buffon, did it through experiments. He heated iron spheres of different sizes and timed how long they took to cool. Then he extrapolated that to the size of the Earth.
In God.
An age of nearly 75,000 years. Hugely older than Archbishop Usher's famous 4004 BC date for creation. Buffon presented a world history of slow, gradual change over vast epochs. He even reinterpreted the 7 days of Genesis as 7 long ages.
That opens up a lot of time for things to happen. And understanding geology, the layers of the Earth.
Nicholas Steno, a Danish scientist working in Italy, had the key insight there. He realized that layers of rock, strata, record Earth's history.
Like pages in a book.
Precisely. He formulated the law of superposition. Lower layers are older, and started defining different rock types. It turned the Earth itself into a historical document.
So Buffon gives you the time, Steno gives you the record. That's the stage for evolution, isn't it?
It absolutely sets the stage. Without that vast time scale, evolution is unthinkable. It allows for the slow, gradual processes that Lyell later championed with uniformitarianism, the idea that the forces shaping Earth today are the same ones that acted in the past. Slow erosion, slow uplift, species appearing, species going extinct.
And then Darwin and Wallace arrive almost simultaneously with the mechanism.
Natural selection.
Yeah.
Darwin had been working on it for years, influenced by Lyell and Malthus on population pressure. Then, bam, Alfred Russel Wallace sends him an essay outlining basically the same idea. Very. Darwin was distraught. But Lyell and Hooker arranged for both their papers to be presented together, ensuring Darwin, with his mountain of evidence, got priority, despite Darwin's own fairness.
And Wallace went on to other things.
Yeah, fascinating guy. Became deeply involved in spiritualism, campaigned against vaccination, shows how complex scientific figures can be. But that simultaneous discovery highlights how ideas can be in the air, ready to be found. Hashtag 5E, the public face of science and the information revolution.
Okay, let's talk about how science became, well, more public. How did scientists start collaborating and sharing ideas more effectively?
Early networks were crucial. Marin Mersenne, a friar in Paris, basically ran an information hub from his monastery cell in the early 17th century.
How? Just talking to people.
He corresponded constantly with thinkers all over Europe, Descartes, Gassendi, Hobbes, probably Galileo. He connected people, shared news, posed questions. His cell was like an early parliament of scientists.
A human internet node.
Kind of.
Yeah.
And then came the formal societies, like the Royal Society in London, chartered in 1662.
What made them so important?
They provided a forum, but also crucial was someone like Henry Oldenburg, their first secretary. He wasn't just organizing meetings. He was essentially a scientific journalist.
Yes. Oh.
He took the letters, reports, observations sent to the society and turned them into the first proper scientific journal, Philosophical Transactions, starting in 1665, spreading the news systematically.
And they insisted on experiments being done by members.
Yes, that was a fundamental law.
Hmm.
Witnessed experiments done properly, not just hearsay or random anecdotes like in older natural history. It built credibility and shared methodology.
Okay, shifting gears. Standardization. It seems obvious now, but weights and measures were a total mess back then.
A complete nightmare. A gallon of wine wasn't the same as a gallon of ale in England. Different pounds, different bushels. James Madison said it was almost as bad as speaking different languages. Huge barrier to trade and science.
So who helped sort it out? This hero of measurement.
Simon Stevin, a brilliant Belgian mathematician and engineer around 1600. He championed the use of decimal fractions for everyday calculations and measurements.
Decimals. Seems basic now.
But making them standard was key to creating an international language of mathematics for precise, comparable measurements. He also built a cool sailing chariot, by the way.
Huh. And instruments got better too, not just observing, but measuring precisely.
Big improvements. Pedro Nunez added a scale called Anonius to astrolabes for finer readings. Pierre Vernier refined that into the vernier scale we still use on calipers.
Allowing much smaller measurements.
Exactly. And William Gascoigne, incredibly, put a spider's thread in a telescope eyepiece to act as a micrometer for measuring tiny angles between stars. Ingenious little fixes that dramatically increase precision.
Now, Newton, scientific hero, right? But also involved in a nasty fight over who invented calculus.
Newton's fame was immense, unprecedented, knighted for science. His mathematical approach seemed to unlock the universe. But yes, the priority dispute with Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz over calculus was brutal.
How bad was it?
Newton, as president of the Royal Society, basically used his power to crush Leibniz. He appointed a committee stacked with his supporters to investigate, wrote their report himself claiming Leibniz plagiarized him, published anonymous attacks.
Yikes. That's not very scientific spirit.
It really wasn't. It supposedly broke Leibniz's heart, shows the intense competition and, yes, ego involved even at the highest levels. Priority disputes became way more common as discoveries sped up.
Let's end this section with the ultimate information revolution, the printing press. How did it change not just access to knowledge, but how people even thought or remembered?
Boorstin argues it was profound. The printed book became a reliable warehouse of memory, externalizing it. You didn't need those complex medieval memory arts anymore, like imagining vast buildings filled with things to recall.
Because you could just look it up.
Exactly. Numbered pages, indexes, tables of contents. These features made retrieval easy. It changed the value placed on rote memorization, much like Socrates worried writing itself would weaken memory.
Interesting parallel. Freud later exploring the unconscious as another kind of memory store.
Yeah, a hidden repository. And printing didn't just store information. It standardized it, especially language.
How did printing standardize English, for instance?
William Caxton, setting up his press in England in the late 15th century, had to choose which dialect, which spellings to use. His choices, multiplied over thousands of copies, helped shape a more uniform written English.
He mentions that funny story about eggs versus Aaron.
Right. A London merchant couldn't buy eggs in Kent because they used a different word. Caxton's printing helped to bridge those gaps over time. Later, Dr. Johnson's dictionary didn't fix the language, but documented its richness and changeability.
Did printing have the same earth-shattering effect everywhere? What about China, where they had printing earlier?
China had block printing for centuries, producing massive works, Buddhist scriptures, government documents, even paper money. Huge cultural impact.
But not movable type in the same way.
They invented movable type too, first with clay, then wood and metal. But partly because of the vast number of Chinese characters and perhaps cultural factors, it never led to the same explosion of cheap, mass-produced books and the kind of critical public discourse that emerged in Europe. The impact was different.
And the Muslim world was slow to adopt printing.
Very slow. There was resistance from calligraphers whose jobs were threatened, and religious objections, especially to printing the Quran. The first press in Istanbul wasn't until 1727, centuries after Gutenberg, and it had a limited run. Cultural context really matters for technology adoption.
So Carlyle was right about movable type creating a whole new democratic world.
In Europe, its impact was revolutionary, empowering new voices, spreading dissent, enabling science. And Boorstin extends that legacy, calling Louis Braille, who invented the reading system for the blind, the Gutenberg of the blind, empowering through accessible information.
Okay, last big area. Discovering ourselves, humanity, through history and society. How did different cultures look at their own past?
Well, Boorstin contrasts them. Muslim history, he says, was often seen as a conversational science, focused on the prophet, rulers, deriving political lessons, not necessarily seeking new knowledge about change itself.
And Chinese history.
Deeply tied to Confucian ancestor worship, very bureaucratic, controlled by an official history office. The goal was often to find precedents, ideals from the past to restore, rather than analyzing historical development or change as we might think of it now.
But in the West, a critical approach to history started to emerge, questioning the sources.
Yes, starting in the Renaissance. Figures like Petrarch started spotting forgeries in old documents. Lorenzo Valla was a real pioneer, using linguistic analysis to debunk things like the donation of Constantine. He was like a Paracelsus of literary learning, attacking uncritical acceptance of texts.
And this led to dividing history into periods, ancient, medieval, modern.
Flavio Biondo, an Italian humanist, is credited with that framework. While trying to celebrate Italy's connection to ancient Rome and its modern revival, he essentially created the Middle Ages as this thousand-year gap in between.
A dark age.
That was the implication, a period of disintegration.
Yeah.
Hugely influential framework, though obviously simplifies things massively. We still use it.
Let's turn to archaeology. Unearthing the past, literally. It started with just fascination with ruins.
Pretty much. Renaissance figures like Cyriacus of Ancona traveled around, sketching ancient monuments, copying inscriptions, feeling the divine power of the past. Poggio Bracciolini explored Roman ruins too. It was romantic, antiquarian.
Then comes Winckelmann, the father of scientific archaeology. How is he scientific if he mostly looked at copies?
His science was in his systematic approach. He tried to create a history of ancient art, tracing styles, periods, influences across cultures. He aimed for order and analysis, even if his materials weren't ideal by later standards. He brought structure.
But Heinrich Schliemann was the guy who just went and dug, right? Driven by Homer.
Schliemann is the classic story. Obsessed since childhood with finding Troy, literally used Homer's Iliad as a guide. Then he went to Mycenae, trusted an obscure ancient traveler's account over the experts.
And found treasure.
Dug inside the citadel walls, where scholars said not to, and found those spectacular gold masks and treasures he claimed belonged to Agamemnon. Proved that sometimes passionate conviction, even a childhood wish, can lead to amazing discoveries.
And organizing prehistory before writing, how did that happen? The stone, bronze, iron ages.
That came from a museum curator in Copenhagen, Christian Jørgensen Thomsen. Around 1836, he needed a practical way to organize the artifacts in the National Museum of Denmark.
Just for display.
Initially, yes. But his simple system tools of stone came first, then bronze, then iron turned out to be a profound insight into technological development. His Guide to Scandinavian Antiquities laid out this three-age system and brought the first real clarity to the prehistoric timeline.
And then someone figured out ancient garbage dumps were key. Kitchen middens.
Jens Jacob Orsay, Thomson's successor, often called the first professional archaeologist. He realized these huge piles of shells found along coasts weren't natural deposits, but ancient trash heaps, kitchen middens.
What did that reveal?
Daily life. What people ate, the tools they discarded. It opened up a whole new view of ordinary life in the Stone Age, discovered right there on the spot in the field. It pushed prehistory back even further and raised big questions about how cultures developed.
So understanding the past isn't just digging. What about understanding social patterns, Tyler, and survivals?
Edward Tyler, a founder of anthropology, had this idea of survivals, customs or beliefs that hang on in a culture long after their original context is gone.
Like what?
His example was an old woman still using a hand loom in the age of factories. These survivals, he argued, were clues, proofs, and examples of earlier stages of culture, allowing you to trace the course of civilization.
And Lewis Henry Morgan had an even grander scheme, universal stages of progress.
Morgan argued in ancient society that all human societies progressed through similar stages: savagery, barbarism, civilization, driven by technological and social innovations. He saw this pattern everywhere, including Native American societies he studied, and collected vast amounts of data on kinship systems and social structures to prove it.
A bit linear, maybe, but influential. What about understanding human diversity? Did Europeans expect to find monsters in the New World?
There were certainly medieval legends about monstrous races, dog-headed people, cyclops, etc. But Columbus actually reported his disappointment at not finding them, saying the natives had very handsome bodies.
So reality intruded on myth.
To some extent. Though theologians like Augustine had already pondered if such monstrous races, if they existed, were still descendants of Adam. Interestingly, early Europeans didn't immediately link race strongly to skin color. They often explained darker skin by climate, still assuming a single human origin. Funds like Las Casas fought vigorously for the humanity and rights of Native Americans.
Okay, finally, the science of society. Using numbers, demography started with counting deaths.
Literally. John Grant in 17th century London took the city's weekly bills of mortality lists of who died and why.
Compiled by these searchers, elderly women.
Yes, who might, for a fee, be discreet about the cause of death. Grant analyzed these lists, finding patterns in death rates, male versus female births, the impact of plagues. It was the birth of vital statistics.
And some saw God's plan in these numbers.
Absolutely. William Durham wrote Physicotheology, using Grant's data, like the fact that slightly more boys were born than girls, useful for replacing soldiers lost in war as evidence of divine providence. Susmos called Grant a Columbus for discovering this new world of population data.
And then Kelly looked for laws in all kinds of social data. Moral statistics.
Adolphe Quetelet believed you could find statistical regularities, almost like laws of physics, in everything: crime rates, suicide rates, marriage ages, even chest measurements of soldiers. He pushed for international data collection, laying groundwork for sociology, finding predictable patterns in seemingly random human actions.
And Adam Smith fundamentally changed how we think about wealth.
The wealth of nations shifted the focus from a nation's hoard of gold to the productivity and trade of its people, and ultimately, the world economy. The irony Boorstin notes is that Charles Townshend, responsible for taxes that angered American colonists, encouraged Smith to write this free trade Bible. Smith himself was famously absent-minded, once walking straight into a tanning pit.
And lastly, Keynes. He basically invented the modern concept of unemployment as a central economic problem.
John Maynard Keynes made unemployment, a word barely used before the 1890s, a core focus. He completely challenged the old laissez-faire idea that wages would just naturally fall to a level where everyone had a job.
What did he argue instead?
He said wage cuts could actually increase unemployment by reducing overall spending power, what he called aggregate demand. He argued the invisible hand wasn't enough. Government needed to step in, become visible, and manage demand to maintain full employment. A revolution in economic thought. Ouch.
Wow. That was quite a journey through centuries of discovery. We've gone from charting time and space to mapping the human body, classifying nature, and even trying to quantify society itself.
It really underscores Boorstin's point, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Discovery is so rarely that eureka moment. It's messy, accidental, built on previous work, fought over.
Absolutely. Full of resistance to new ideas, the crucial role of new tools sometimes found by chance, and personal rivalries shaping the path.
And the constant interplay between seeing something new and actually being able to understand it, to fit it into your worldview, or needing to change the worldview itself.
So, thinking about all this for today, in our age, just flooded with information, how do we even spot the genuinely new insights, the truly transformative discoveries amidst all the noise?
That's the challenge, isn't it? And maybe looking back at these historical patterns, the unexpected breakthroughs, the slow shifts in thinking, the power of simply asking a different kind of question can help.
Maybe the real question is, what are the unfamiliar questions we aren't asking today? What crucial discoveries might be waiting just beyond the edge of our current assumptions? Something to think about.